I'll have to read the chat. That's all right. All right, folks, let's talk a little bit about success in the vending industry. What we've got here is we've got success. The purpose of this webinar is to teach you all how to be a little bit more successful in the vending industry. And we have a couple of things. I always like to start off with planning. I am a big person that deals with planning. One of the things that we like to talk about is when you get into vending, you need to have some sort of a plan as far as what your business concepts are. And so I always like to start with planning. I've got here that we've talked about. One of the first things that we like to talk about is a business plan. And we like to make sure that you have some kind of a business plan. Business plan, you're going to want to have some people involved with that, and some people that you might need involved in it. So part of that things are said is to have a business plan to start.
Speak up a bit, Larry.
I can't hear you.
Joe and Tim, are you there?
Yeah.
All right. What's your opinions on having a business plan?
Well,
I think very valuable tools. I think you need to, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably not going to hit what you're aiming at.
we always had a kind of like a 5-year business plan because, you know, you don't get rich overnight in this business, but you want to, maybe finance your first set of machines and then they're paid off in 3 years, and in your second set of machines in 5 years is almost paid off, and that's about 5 years is about when you start, doing pretty good in this business. So you got to have some sort of plan.
Got to have some sort of a plan. So that's the first place to start, folks. You want to start with some kind of a plan. It can be as simple as just a very simple business plan is this year I want to add 3 new accounts. I want them to be, get very specific with it, get into detail. I want to add 3 new accounts. I want to have 100 employees in that account, and I want it to do X amount of dollars per sale. That's the kind of business plan that we're talking about. You can do a very in-depth business plan, but consult your people. You got to have good people that work with you as well. You've got to have a good accountant. You've got to have a good equipment person out there. I personally always like to use Joe at A&M Equipment, and now you've got Tim Paul as another person that can be an equipment person resource for you. They can give you the wrong equipment if you haven't figured it out. It can be catastrophic to your business. The right equipment can make all the difference in the world. So in your business plan, include the people that are strategic into your concepts. I wrote strategic goals here too. Some of the things that I like to think about anyway are strategic goals. And when I talk about strategic goals, it's where do you want to go? What is it that you want to do? How much money is it that you want to make? Where are you and what do you want to do? I also throw in accounting. You have to have a good accountant. You have to have a good accounting program. You've got to be able to account for your money at the machine level. If you're lucky enough, you can do it at the product level, but you've got to be able to do it at the machine level. Keep track of the money, because if the money gets away from you, it costs you thousands and thousands of dollars. I personally like to have a tax. Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead. As far as accounting,
go ahead.
The simple way that we used to do it is we used to keep all our receipts, gas receipts, tools, cell phone bills, just keep all your receipts. Now you need to go to Office Depot and get some sort of automobile log that you can log in, your mileage and that type stuff for the IRS. Just keep all your documentation so that when you do get with an accountant, you won't have any problems.
You know about TurboTax, Joe?
Well, I'm an old guy, and I don't do this computer stuff real good. So, yeah, that'd be good.
What was that suggestion, Tom?
The TurboTax.
Oh, TurboTax, yeah. Those are macro accounting. When I talk about accounting at the machine level, we used to keep an inventory. I would go into a machine with a 3x5 card. I would write down everything that I was putting in that machine. I would take that machine, that card, then went into the money bag, and the money and the inventory that I put in pretty much needed to match the money that came out. So that way I could keep control of theft. I could keep control of any of the other things that might go on as a changer malfunctioning, and there's all kinds of things that you can do, but there's that kind of accounting as well. You can do accounting at the machine level. Very, very important to have accounting at the machine level as well. So along with all the receipts and things like that, you got to keep those receipts. Those things can't happen. I like to have a tax strategy. I like to know, how can I pay the least amount of tax possible. That was a personal thing that I always liked to have. And then I like to have marketing strategies. My marketing strategies had to do with which customers did I feel the most comfortable serving. I had specific people that I preferred to work with. This is a strategic kind of planning that you can do. I personally like to go after accounts that had truck drivers. It was easier. They were good vending people, and those were things that I did. One of the things that I always like to say to achieve success, how well do you serve your customers? And if what you're doing doesn't serve your customers, you need to be thinking about what are the things that you do that serve your customers well. So that's a little bit about some of the planning stages that we have. Joe and Tim, do you have anything to add to those?
No, I think what you said about having kind of a plan is excellent, and I think you need to pay some attention to your marketing strategy in terms of what type of accounts you want to target. I mean, if you're going to grow your business, you've obviously got to acquire new accounts, and you need to have some kind of idea as to what type of accounts you want to go after. I mean, obviously, everybody wants to have the local hospital. Everybody wants to have the new car manufacturing facility. But that may not be something that's feasible in your business to accommodate something like that. So you need to have an idea of what you can do, how big of accounts you can manage, and pay attention to that before you go and start trying to grow your business with something that you can't handle.
Always people come to me and say, I got 60 machines out. Well, it's not the amount of machines you have; it's the amount of money that you're making out of these machines. So you kind of look at each account and see what type of money you're pulling in, and if it, I'd love to sell you machines, but if you're not making any money in an account, that's a good thing about vending machines. You pull them out and put them somewhere else, and so you got to really look at what type of money you're making in each account.
Right, and that's really a key thing. Is it's not how many machines you have out, right, Joe? It's how much money do you make out of each machine as per, in a more advanced state, as per how much return on investment do you get out of each of those machines. So if you have a $1,000 machine in one account that generates $500 a week, and you have a $5,000 machine in another account that generates $500 a week, which one are you really better off with? Well, you're better off with that $1,000 machine generating $500 than you are the $5,000 machine generating $500 a week. But a lot of that also depends on what the expectations of the customers are. So I do, I like to tell people, be aware of what your customers' expectations are, and figure out in your planning stages what kind of customer you want to go after that possibly has the kind of equipment that you're looking for, because not everybody can afford to buy brand new equipment for their particular account. Does anyone out there have any questions? If you can, you can put it on the chat line. You can type in a chat thing. The chat button is up next to the green. It's this button right here, and it will.
Well, they can't see it.
They can't see it. Okay.
They can't see our screen, but there's a little chat feature at the top of your Join Me. It's a Join Me icon. It should be green. So if you have a question, we'll interrupt and ask it, or I'll try to. I don't know. Larry may not let me butt in.
Well, Larry lets you butt in. He doesn't like to talk that much. So as we go, folks, if you do have questions, don't hesitate to sit in on the chat line. I always start my concepts with sales. That's sales. There's three things that are critical for success in the vending industry, and all three relate to all of the other two, and that's sales, service, and operations. And sales is the process of getting new accounts. Service is the process of making sure that your equipment and all of the things that keep your operation running that they actually work the way you want them to. And operations are all the processes that have to do with actually selling the product outside of the equipment side, which is kind of what we always determine with service. But in the vending industry, if you're in the vending business, you'll understand that this is the case. If your machines don't work, you're going to have poor operations, and subsequently you're not going to have success in the vending business, and you're going to have to make more sales to get your machines back out into the thing. And if you have a good sales department, but you can't deliver in the operations side, if you can't keep the machines full, it really doesn't matter how many sales you make, because you're going to be spending all your time moving your equipment around. So these three things right here, sales, service, and operations, are all critically tied together. And so you've got to make sure that you're doing each one in an excellent fashion. Now, I start with sales because if you're brand new to the business, nothing starts without a sale. If you don't get an account, you don't have a business to start with. So when we go to sales, again, I'm big on planning, so we've got the sales plan, as it were. A sales plan is just basically kind of back to who do you want to sell to and how are you going to do it. One of the biggest efforts or biggest things that I've seen in all the years of doing sales is that people don't do consistent effort in sales. They don't go out and do it in a consistent manner. Joe and Tim, do you say that? Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. I all the time. I mean, you have to be constantly prospecting for new accounts if you're going to grow in the vending business. That's absolutely critical.
We always made it a point of every Wednesday going out. Wednesday was our day to go out. We put on the sport coat, the tie, have the cards, and look like $1 million. Start knocking on doors. We'd have a kind of a book that we'd write down the name, the address, the phone number, the contact, the email address. We'd go in there and talk to them. We would, we'd count the cars outside to kind of figure out how many people were in the location. A lot of times we'd go to the, industrial section at night and see if there was cars out in the parking lot, because a lot of times you might have, an account with 20 cars during the day, and then they got 3 to 11, they got another 20, and 11 to 7, they'd have another 20. So actually they'd have between 60 and 80 people, and you'd think they'd only have 20. So you got to kind of, ride around at night on some of these industrial places. Once you get into an account and you start looking at looking at the inside the account, you look at the time card rack, see how many time cards are in there. Another tip is, if you look inside the snack machine, if you want to see if there's any, product going through pretty quick, you'd look at the potato chips. Usually it has 6-week shelf life. If it's, if they're moving pretty quick and nothing stale or 2-3 weeks date left on it, you're selling some product. I'd go to ask the contact how many times a week the vending person goes there, and
sure. Those are all really good tips. Got a couple of questions from the chat line here that we're going to answer real quick while we've got a chance. One of the questions is, what's the best sales strategy? Is it cold calls, flyers, or buy accounts? When I was running a vending business, I did a whole bunch of cold calls. Didn't do too much in the way of flyers or in advertising, and I did buy a few accounts every once in a while. But when I was buying accounts, I had to make sure, that's kind of a subject unto itself. But you can buy accounts, you just have to buy them properly, and that means you don't pay too much money for them, up front, because you just bury yourself if you don't do it properly. And properly depends on each individual account, so it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. Joe, what was your experience when you were out selling vending accounts? What's the best way? I mean, you sounded like you were pretty much out selling all the time.
Yeah, best way is just go out there and knock on doors. A lot of times we would see, some groundbreaking. there'd be a construction trailer there, that's when you need to go out there and get the account, right when you see the construction trailer, because you go into the construction trailer, the architect or the general manager is there, and they know the contact at the company that's going to be moving into the building. So, you know, you can
I
talk
always
to
watch
them,
for
get a
new
phone
construction
number.
too. Yeah, I watch for new construction as well.
You
Let's
could go to the
go.
building
I've got a
permits
couple other
office.
questions here. I've got a couple other questions here. I got back to accounting. I'm always looking for a better way to keep up with sales and losses. I've written it down, tried spreadsheets. Any idea on the best and most efficient way to do this? And there's another one that someone said, what's the best route vending software to track sales and service? Tim, do you have any input on that? Do you have any input on what the best software might be? Do you see in your nationwide experience?
There's several of them. I mean, Coinco, MEI, USA Technologies, Crane has one. They all have, just about everybody has one, and they're all pretty good. The only problem with software, these telemetry things that you use to track your machines, is all of them require, the cost of them is kind of prohibitive unless you're a pretty good size operator. I would say you've got to have at least 50 machines out before you start doing this telemetry stuff. If you're not at least that big, you're probably going to be better off just to do it pencil and paper style, because it is fairly expensive.
So it's 6 a.m., 5 o'clock after the long day stadium. So I come home.
So I modified QuickBooks to where I just logged in each machine under an account name, and I actually had a system that I could track myself just through QuickBooks, which is off-the-shelf type software. It wasn't automated. It was very much a kind of a paper and pencil type system, but it worked really well. I had real-time data, or not real-time, but I had good
Hey,
data.
Larry,
Yep.
I'm going to have to interrupt just for a second here, and we'll continue in just a moment, okay?
Yep, got it. All right,
sorry about that.
that's okay. Yep. So that's what I used, and it worked quite well. And somebody just wrote Microsoft Access works well also. Yeah, there's a million accounting programs that you can use. You just might have to make some modifications to it. And as Tim was saying, there are the big level programs that you can get into, but they're specialized software. They're expensive for smaller operators, and you've got to get out and really be doing some business before they're of any benefits to you at all. Back in the sales thing, someone asked, do we establish service level agreements with your clients? Personally, I always did things on a handshake. I would sometimes put in an agreement where I would have just a placement agreement, I called it, more than a service level agreement, but it laid out the basic strategies of what we were trying to do. We would say basically we're going to modify our route scheduling based on your level of use and things like that. And that we usually had some kind of a description on service calls and phone numbers and things like that. But it was very informal. I always said that people could remove me if they wanted to because they can. No contract is really a ironclad contract. That was just the way that I operated. A lot of people have very strong contracts they put in. Tim, do you have anything on that, on the nationwide level, what the average guy does?
You know, in today's world, it seems like, especially larger accounts, people try to have some type of contract. Just like you said, any contract that you draw up is going to be able to be broken by whomever needs to break it. I mean, there's no such thing as an ironclad contract. But but a large accounts, if you're having to put out a lot of equipment, if you get the local hospital, if you get a large facility that you got to put 50 machines in or something, then I would try to have some type of contract for X amount of years to get some return on that investment, not a 60-day contract or something.
And I concur on those kinds of accounts. When you have a large equipment investment or you have a large liability situation, you've got to have some kind of thing in writing. One other thing I do want to say, if you're paying commissions, you have to have it in writing. You have to have it because you don't want the he said, she said kind of stuff. You told me this and you're doing this kind of thing. That just works really well to do that. So hopefully that answers your questions pretty well. I wanted to get back to the things that I wrote on the sheet over here as to who sells. Largely, if you're a small operator, the person that sells the most is going to be the owner. Really, the guy that's out there, the guy that owns the business is the one who's going to do most of the selling. He needs to do his consistent efforts on a regular basis. But I also like to go down here and look at who has the most time in front of the customers, because a guy that's in front of the customers is the person that has the most contact with the customer, and that's whomever. In a smaller operation, it's your route man, or if it's lots of times it's the owner. I always ran route, so I was out selling all the time while I was running route. But my route men also sold too. They mostly sold themselves, but a good route man gets you lots and lots of good business. The other people that can sell are your service guys. If you have a service man, if you've got a guy out there who's running service, he's got time in front of the customer. So, whoops, I went the wrong way with that. So he's actually servicing the account, or has the ability to sit in front of a customer and service too. And then I put lastly on this, I put in the owner. The sales personnel and the owner are the people that sell. So anybody that has time in front of a customer is actually selling, or can be selling, in one way or another. It's not always cut and dry selling, but it's a guy. If you have a good route man, he's out there. He's selling just as much as the other guy. And many times, at least in my experience, I would have people actually call and say, hey, you can have our account if we can get Paulo to come in and do our account. And that's just the name of one of my guys. But he was a fantastic route man that I had that worked for me, and he actually spoke Spanish as well. So he did a lot of our Hispanic accounts. I wanted to touch, too, on just a little bit of proper training. It helps to have some sales training. There's plenty of books out there. There's a great book by a guy named Tom Hopkins. He is a sales trainer. His book just gives you a real basic introduction to selling. It's very easy read, and it gives you some great tips on how to sell. You can take seminars and you can do all that stuff, or you can just go out and shake hands and let people know you want their business. It takes a little bit of people skills. Almost everybody has it. But just get out there and be enthusiastic and say, hey, we really want your business, and it gets you going.
One thing I have found is the small vendor really has a better chance with a location than the large vendor, because the large vendor, he's got so many route men and so many different people doing so many different things that a lot of times these big vendors, they have planograms and they put certain things in the snack machine. It might not be what the location wants, where, a smaller vendor can go to that location and say, hey, I've got one other guy that helps me, and, I go in there and, if you want honey buns or cinnamon rolls and you're not getting them, I can have them in, the next day if you want them. So, you've got personalized service where the large vending companies don't have that. So
that gets back to some of this proper training that we're talking about, and that's one of the things, and that's why I say route men are your tremendous sales guys for you, because if they're customer responsive, if someone comes in and says, I really would like a Zagnut bar, and he happens to have them out on the truck and he brings them in that minute, that's huge sales work right there, especially if it's somebody important in the account. So I'm with you on that one, Joe. I completely agree with that. I've got a couple of questions here from the chat line. I'm going to answer one and then answer the other one. I'm going to answer the school one first. It says, what's the best approach for schools that already have a servicer? And I'm going to give you my answer, and that is that schools, the biggest thing about schools is schools look at bids usually once a year. It's usually in the summertime. At least that's how it works in the state of Georgia, which is where I did most of my operations. So the first thing is that unless a school's really having a problem with a servicer, they're going to not even really talk to you until June, July area. Well, that's a month after school's out here in Georgia. For those people in the north, it's a little bit different if your school lets out later. But it's usually about a month after they get out of school that they start looking for a new route provider. So that's the first thing. How do you get in there? It's the sales process. It's going to take you a bunch of time. Get in there, sell your service, find out what that customer wants, what they don't want, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Are they paying commissions? Are they happy with their commissions? All of the kind of information that you need to go in and have a good thing. So that's my opinion. Joe and Tim, do you have anything on getting schools?
Well, I think things are changing right now with all the Obama rules and regulations and everything. And I think right now is a good time to go in there and talk to these schools because, you know, you got old-time vendors in there that don't want to change things. And, you know, like the AMS has a calorie content that you can automatically, you know, goes on the display. And
You're laying the groundwork for when that sales time comes up in June if you go in
and it's going to
now.
come up very soon.
And it's faster
I heard it was April.
Yeah, but if you start talking to them now about that, you know, a lot of these old-time vendors aren't going to do all this stuff. So you could go in there and get this account.
So that's a super good strategy that works for us right now. So I've got it. There's another question here on the chat line, and it says that this is a person who has a couple of hotel accounts. This applies to any account, by the way. They're fairly new. They're new accounts to this particular vendor, and the units are pretty new vendors, and she's pretty sure, or he or she, I'm not really sure, they're pretty sure that they're not failing with the amount, like they are for the amount of refunds that they're paying. So this person's asking, is there any ideas on cameras or that record video that don't take up a lot of space, especially in snack machines? Joe, do you have an answer for that? I know what my answer was. I changed a lot of my machines out to AMS machines or to any machine with a guaranteed vend system, and I basically showed the people behind the counters of these places that, like, look, if they don't get the product, it's either going to be hanging there or they're lying. Now, that was my solution, and I literally went to Guaranteed Vend Solutions to fix that.
We did that on all the Georgia locations, you know, the rest area locations. They had APs out there with no guaranteed delivery, and we put all AMSs out there in 2001, and the refunds dropped to nothing because what the vendor could say is, you know, you didn't lose your money because you either got your money back or you got your product, one or the other.
And so that's my idea. I have tried to run the cameras idea in the past. Very difficult to implement. Very, very, very hard to actually work with, particularly in a semi-public location like a hotel. I'd just say, and I'm not trying to spend your money for you folks, but I would change that to a guaranteed vend system and make sure that management understands it's a guaranteed vend system and just go from there.
We're putting guaranteed delivery systems on all different types of machines now. What we do is we can do it with APs and nationals and every type of machine. We put brand new electronics in it with the guaranteed delivery system, and they work really well, you know, on our remanufactured equipment. So don't think you can't put that on.
Yeah, you can do that. Bill's asking a question about the secrets of finding a good route guy. I'm going to get to that under operations, Bill. So stick with me on that question. We will get to that. Let's talk a little bit about service here while we're at it. We're just going to kind of change topics. Keep asking the questions, folks. We really, really appreciate it. We will get to them. Again, you all know I'm big on planning. I do like to have a maintenance plan, particularly on refrigerated machines for me, because I like to make sure that my coils were clean. I like to make sure that my machines were being checked on a fairly regular basis. I hated having to fix machines that broke when I didn't know, or when it's not that I didn't know they weren't going to break. Eventually it's equipment, it's going to break. But I certainly didn't want it not working because it was clogged up with a whole bunch of dirt and debris that could have been fixed with a very simple maintenance plan. And again, that lends itself to this, which is preventative maintenance. I'm big into preventative maintenance. I like to do things before it became a crisis, because running service calls to me was a very expensive process, and I did all the service, or most of the service myself. So I ended up working it into my route, or I ran, when I had a number of employees, I became the service man, and they ran the route, but I became the service man, and I just didn't like doing things that I did that weren't critical. So I always schedule the PM maintenances. I usually put them like, I always did one in the spring. I did one in the fall. I usually did them 3 times a year. Just simple things like cleaning out coils on refrigeration machines and things like that. Changers, we used to change our changers out every 6 months, whether they needed it or not. We took them into the shop and did cleaning. All of this stuff works into that maintenance plan. It's just one of those things that you're going to be successful in the vending industry. You know you're going to have maintenance. You know you're going to have service issues. Things are going to break. It's equipment. I mean, let's be honest. It's equipment. By the way, back to the sales issue, I always went out and told my people that my equipment is just that. Folks, it's equipment. It's going to break. Here's what sets us apart. When it breaks, we're going to be there in X number of hours, and we're going to get it fixed, or we're going to replace that machine. So, again, service works to sales, sales works to service, which we had discussed, too. And operations, we'll get to that, how those other things tie in there. If you haven't been in the business, the service issues, if you've got refrigerated machines, you've got refrigeration to worry about. We all have coin systems. We have any payment system got issues. Big thing on service is make sure you have a timely response. Don't just let it go. If the machine doesn't take dollar bills, go out and fix it. Get somebody out there and fix it. If you got to swap a validator out, swap the validator out. Keep a couple on your truck. It's really not a big expense. Once you get up and get running, it's not a big expense, and it only takes a couple of minutes. And those kinds of things are what set you apart from your competitors. Joe, what's your take? You're the machine man, and Tim, you too. You're a machine man. Tell us what they need to do for maintenance.
The main thing that I always preach every time a guy buys a machine from me is any refrigerated machine, coffee machine, food machine needs to be on a dedicated 20-amp circuit. Because I've had so many people call me up saying, hey, my machine's doing heebie-jeebie things. It's blowing boards, it's blowing compressors, and the poor things starve for electricity. So make sure that you've got all that on a dedicated 20-amp circuit, each one of these things. Now, the snack machine, the bill changer, that can go anywhere. It doesn't matter. Another thing I would do is I'd always have a tape measure, so if I got a new account, I could measure the doors to make sure the machines will fit in the doors, and also measure the space where you're going to put the machines and make sure everything will fit. Another thing is once I got the machines in, I would level them up to where all the change and everything will roll
the way it's supposed to roll. That's exactly what that is.
And then I'd put some 1x6s. 1x6s on the top. Once everything's leveled up and looks good, put some 1x6s across the top, 2 runs of 1x6s, put some self-tapping screws in there to where everything stays lined up. And if it's lined up, they can't shake the machines. They don't, they don't get back up against the wall and everything. It looks real pretty. So,
Tim, what do you have to say about that?
Larry, I think service is one of those areas that's critical, because the best way to grow your vending business is to take care of the accounts you have and then secure a new account. Then you've grown your business. If you don't take care of your current account and you're constantly swapping accounts, your business is not going to grow. So concentrate on your service on your existing accounts to make sure you do your preventative maintenance, that you keep your customer happy, keep his machines fixed and going, and it pays huge dividends down the road. Because if you go get a bigger account, you can say, call this account, and check on my service. And those there's not a better sales tool you can have than good references.
Yeah, and that's where I say that sales and service things go back and forth, right? And it also gets over here to operations, which we'll get to in a minute. One thing, too, I want to remind people is also technology updates. When we get new pieces of technology out there in the marketplace, and they seem to be coming on a very regular basis, we want to make sure, stay abreast of it, folks. It doesn't mean you have to buy it. Just be aware that it's out there. Guaranteed vend systems a few years ago were very cost prohibitive. They were hard to install. Today they come on new machines. They come built into the machines, and now they're very low cost to put in. Great technology, with great benefits, but pay attention to it. And I'm not particularly selling anything out there that's out there right now as being the latest and greatest, but just be aware of how it affects what's going on in the industry. Let's move over to operations right now, and we'll start talking a little bit about operations. Operations is the day-to-day operations of your business. What do you do? What do your people do on a day-to-day basis to keep things running, to keep you successful in the vending business? Well, again, here's a recurring theme in Larry's world: planning. I always like to plan. I had a bunch of different kinds of planning that occurred in my world, and operational stuff it's kind of a plan when you set it in you don't think about it too much more. But we were really strong in scheduling. We were very strong at marketing at the machine level, and I did like to have my guys trained really, really well. And by the way, the first person that I trained was me. I was the first person. When I got out there as the owner, I built the system that I wanted my people to work. So I had a system in my head that I wanted to do, and it was based on efficiency, and it was based on profitability, and it was based on ease. Before I ever hired a single person, I had a pretty good system down to make it simple to go out and run route and make it simple so that when a new guy came in, or when I taught a guy how to work, I had a system that worked for him, and it was pretty simple, in general. We actually, it gets into things like building your truck. We built trucks that mirrored our machines. And why did we do that? Well, we did that because it allowed the route man to not really have to think. He knew that things on the top shelf went on the top shelf of the machine, middle, down, all the way down through the machine, and he just reached up and took what he needed off of those things. So when we talk about training, we do talk about, we talk about training yourself. Marketing at the machine level, I'm big about marketing at the machine level. To me, that means you have a planogram. And what a planogram is it's a picture of what you're selling in your machine at each column. And it's really, really important that you know that. If all your machines are exactly the same, you know what's going to sell better by looking at the machine just at a visual glance than you will any other way. It also keeps your inventory systems simple. It keeps everything about your whole system simple. It also allows, when you get to that point where you hire an employee, you can tell if he's doing his job, because if the machine doesn't look the way it's supposed to be, he's now accountable for it. And but that works even for you to do that. The other thing that we have down here is scheduling. I made my money in scheduling. I made my schedules build maximum profit. I rarely built a schedule that was built around time, meaning I just didn't show up every Wednesday. I showed up when my machines were at a level that I had predetermined with the customer. For me, it was they had 5 empty snack selections and 1 empty drink selection. And I scheduled my accounts out per that. Now, I used that in conjunction with my planogram so that I got a minimum number of staling items. But that's how I made it for maximum profits, because I had a $1 per hour amount of money that I wanted to take out of that machine. And if the population was the same in the account and my machines were working properly, I knew that I could be there every 10 days or every day or every other day, or it just depended on the account and the size. But I knew I could be there and I could take out that minimum dollar amount per hour that I was going to be working. So I was shooting for $100 an hour. If I was going to spend an hour in an account, I wanted to make sure I had $100 in the cash box when I was there. I spent too much of my early career in the vending industry going to an account and taking $20 out and spending an hour and a half doing it. And folks, that just doesn't pay. That does not make you successful in the vending industry. So those are some of the things in the operational side. Tim and Joe, pipe in on this one. Tell me if there's anything I'm missing.
Well, I would always go ahead, Tim.
Scheduling's key on that. You need to know at what level you go and fill up the machine. I mean, obviously, the level you want to go in and fill up a snack machine or a drink machine when there's one product in each column left, but that doesn't work in the real world. So you have to kind of, just like he said, you have to have kind of an idea as at what level you're going to go and fill the machine. And if you're new in the business, it's going to take you a little time to develop that. But you will see pretty quickly that there is a dollar amount that you needs to come out of the machine and an amount that you need to put in the machine that makes it worthwhile to be there. But you want to be there just before your customer is unhappy with the level of product in the machine.
Yep.
That's what loses you accounts, empty machines and the product that I use and want not being in there. So you kind of have to know that, and you have to work on that to make sure you have a schedule that meets those requirements.
I would try to overwork the account the first 2 or 3 weeks to where I could get a grasp on how much the account would do, and that way I could figure out how to schedule it. Another thing is, in the wintertime, I'd be selling a lot of snacks, and then in the summertime, I'd be selling a lot of drinks. So you got to kind of look at it differently, once you hit the summertime, because you might be running out of drinks. So you got to just kind of watch it real close.
Right, and that actually lends it. It's a great segue into what Bill just asked a question off the chat line. He said, then you remotely monitor the machines to know what's been purchased. And to that, being an old-time vendor, before we had remote monitoring, no, we actually did it with a paper system, Bill, where we would guesstimate a par. We just knew if they had 50 people, we probably should load each column up to about 10 items. Okay, so we would just take a piece of paper and we'd stick it at the back of 10 items, just a blank piece of cardboard at the back of 10 items, and at the end of the week, if you come back, and as Joe said, in the first few weeks, you overwork those accounts, so you go more than you think you're going to need, and you'll get a pretty good idea of how many items sell out of each column on a column basis by looking at it if you overwork it. If you sold 8 Snickers and you sold 2 of something else, you knew you were going to need a lot of Snickers. And sometimes sometimes that means you actually take out a column of something and put another column of other things in, just to kind of give you an idea. I had some accounts that had large quantities of Mexican people working in the accounts, and these guys loved honey buns. I mean, beyond what would be normal. We ended up putting in full shelves of honey buns in a week, and they would buy, which, by the way, that was 120 honey buns, and every week they'd buy 110 or so honey buns. And that was tremendous sales off one item, but we've changed the whole planogram on the machine as a result of that. That's working for maximum profits. And if you're not working for maximum profits, you gotta be, change your thinking.
Now the good thing about the way things are going now is you can get that remote monitoring to where you can tell exactly what the machine is sold. You can pre-kit your product to where when you go into the account, you know exactly what's sold. You fill the machine with the kit that you bring in, and you leave. So that's the good thing about all this, new credit card readers and that type stuff. I've got a lady that is getting a lot of the schools, and the way she does the schools is she lets the school monitor see what the sales are in the machine so that the school knows they're getting an accurate commission rate, where the vendor before never would divulge what sales were made in the machines or anything. He just sent them a check. So you can use a lot of this remote monitoring to get accounts, especially with schools.
And that gets us back to that service issue and technology updates that I was talking about. I wanted to answer a quick question. Woody Matthews is asking about the card system, and that would be putting the cards in the rows. If you have, just for example, you have a spiral count in each spiral. This is using an older machine that doesn't have the ability to do remote monitoring. If you know what the counts are on your spirals, and they can be 10s, they can be 12s, they can be 15s, it just depends. But if you want to put a par level in, I used to actually put a picture of the planogram up in the machine, and I would write the numbers on each column. So I would write, say, 12 items. So you fill the column back to 12, and you stick a piece of just cardboard or a piece of paper, it doesn't matter, business card, whatever. You stick it in that spiral behind that. That's 12 units. When the items sell and they move forward in those spirals, it gives you an instant ability to see how many items are actually gone. without having to really sit there and count each item. You just look at the card and you say, oh, that's it had 12, there's now 8 there, it sold 4. That's what that card system is. Very, 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 very simple, very, very easy. And two, Bill, we're going to get to your question on getting good route people. We're going to do that in a few minutes. So I haven't forgotten about that question. I just want to get it. Joe, there's a question here on Vendo 699 M&M refrigerated machine. It seems like a good price. Are they good machines? What's your opinion on that?
Well, we don't sell them anymore because we can't get parts. They're decent machines, but we can't get fronts. We can't get the parts. I would probably stay away from them.
Yeah, and folks, just to go back to one thing I said before, having a group up in your business plan, having a group of advisors that can give you good advice, the things like that. Just for example, if you can't get parts for a machine, it's no deal. Now, if you can buy 50 machines and you can use several for parts, maybe it's a good deal. But if the machines are problematic, and getting with a guy that's like Tim or Joe, who deal with large numbers of vendors and large numbers of vending machines, and they've seen them all, and they've seen them all through the years, you can't pay for that advice. And I say this from my heart because Joe met me about 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago. I don't know. It's been a while. But I was a brand new vendor, and I saw that he knew exactly what he was talking about, and I said, man, I can't pay for this kind of advice. I couldn't go out and pay somebody to give me this kind of advice. And that's a mistake that it might work out just fine for you, but if it costs you money, it doesn't help. And that's really, really, really important. So have good people to give you advice up here in your business planning stage to where they can help you out with, some of these issues. When I started, I went and talked to some of the bigger vendors and just asked them what they did. And I know it sounds funny to talk to your competition, but you can talk to the competition, and it's amazing the information that they'll give you. In fact, I went and talked to competition because I found out that they started giving me their smaller accounts that they didn't want, which was a fantastic way for me to get over here and get some sales. So that was one of the things. I had a couple of very key people in the industry that worked in my geographical area, and they only wanted really, really big accounts, and they were past the stage of they let a lot of the smaller accounts go. They gave them to me. I didn't even have to make a sales call. They were walk-ins. I mean, they were like, oh, you're looking for a new vendor. Wow, well, this is what we do, and boom, you were in. So have good people that you can talk to, people like Joe and people like Tim, people like myself, that can give you, good advice on what you're trying to do. It's part of the reason we're doing this seminar, isn't it, Joe?
That's it, exactly.
So I want to get on to the question about hiring good route men real quick because it's getting close to the end of our session here.
Yeah, that'll be the last question, Larry, and then we'll have to close it out. We'll try to get to other questions by email.
Okay, all right, that works for me, Tom. What I wanted to just describe about getting good people. Getting good people is probably one of the hardest things that we face in any business that you're in. It's really, really difficult to find good route men. And I'm gonna give off my opinions, and I'm gonna ask Joe and Tim because they have as much experience in this area as I do. I found at the end I was looking for specific traits in people and what they did. I was looking for people that were the first thing I did when I tried to recruit a route man is I watched how he walked. If somebody didn't walk quickly,
Exactly,
they were not really going to be for me. I can tell you that. If they weren't paying attention, if they didn't come in, and I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but if they didn't come in and shake my hand and say, how are you, I was done with them. They were already gone. I had to implicitly trust these guys. I had to know they were going to work hard, and I know they were going to have to work pretty smart. And then they had to follow a bit of things. But those were some of the first things. I found a good source for route men. At least I hired some people part-time along with full-time. But I looked in other route businesses because to me, they already knew running route, as it were. Like I had guys that worked for uniform companies that came to work for me. They were fantastic. They hustled. They knew the game. They knew the game, meaning they knew the route business. They walked, they talked fast. They had lots of interaction skills with customers. They were really good for me. Those were some of the things. I always wanted people with good people skills, and they had to be impeccably honest because, of course, that's a huge issue in the vending industry. But with that said, Joe, how did you find good route people?
Well, I did the walking too. The football player type of guy would seem like he'd never make it. It was always a lean, little wiry guy that would make it. And I they could. You look for somebody that can talk and work at the same time, because a lot of people will talk, but they'll stop working. And when you're in a location, you're filling a snack machine. There's a lot of people that are talking to you, and if you don't keep working while you're talking, you get further and further behind to where, you're not going to finish the route in time. You'll be 8, 9 o'clock at night. So you want to look for that. I used to try to find ex-milkmen. Milkmen were, they worked really hard. Actually, they worked harder than vending guys. So,
you really date yourself there, Joe.
Pardon me?
I said you really date yourself there, Joe, if you're looking for milkmen.
Well, they still go to the grocery stores and everything, but,
Yeah, that's true.
The route type of, the beer guys, that type stuff, the route type people is what you want.
Yeah.
And they're not, they're used to hard work. You don't want to get a guy that's never been used to hard work. Not going to work out. What do you think, Tim?
To add to that?
I think certainly those features are necessary. One of the things that we discovered in that business when I was in it is if you get a good route man, it is a lot cheaper to keep the good route man than to go out and hire a new one, because you usually go through 3 or 4 trying to find one good one, and it's a lot better to keep the good ones if you can. And I think you need to look at your pay structure. I think you need to look at one of the things that we did, and this was 30 years ago, but it worked remarkably well, is back in those days, you had changers. You put $1 in it, it gave you 4 quarters. This was before the days of validators and that kind of thing. And just about every decent-sized account had one of these in there. And my dad used to say, when it comes lunchtime, just go in that bag and get enough money to buy you lunch and put me a ticket in there for it. You would just be surprised at what that did for route people. They just thought that was the greatest little perk in the world, and you were, back in those days, you spent $4 or $5 a day, but it just made a world of difference. And it's little things like that in keeping your people that is so critical. The little things matter, just like the little things that guy does for you in an account matters. So the little things that you do for them matter. And so you might
all right. That's all the time we have. What's that, Joe?
All right, folks.
That's all the time we have. On behalf of A&M Equipment Sales, thanks for attending this event. We're planning to have more webinars like this, and we'll be promoting the next one on the website, www.amequipmentsales.com. For further Q&A, contact Larry. His email is servicegroupinternational, spell it all out, one word, servicegroupinternational@gmail.com. Joe's email is joe@amequipmentsales.com. And Tim Paul is tim.paul@amsvendors.com. Also, you can email or ask questions on the A&M Equipment Sales Facebook page for further Q&A. So to keep up with future events like this, subscribe to A&M Equipment Sales newsletter that includes timely tips for the vendor, or just reply to the webinar email with subscribe in the subject line, and we'll add you to our email list. Good night.